How y'all doing out there? It's me. You know how the super villain comes in? It's me. Okay. I had to vibe to my music right quick. No, I don't even want to get that in there because I've been vibing. Okay. Y'all bear with me. Gotta do my little stretch because these chairs, sit in these chairs. Okay. As y'all can see on the screen, I got a lot of things. So if I'm doing screencasts, these are my emails right here too. If you need to contact me, pause or look at that. So yeah, I do not need to sign in. I came across this amazing article. It says June 16th, 2023. That reminds me of a transit or some type of transit astrologically. But anywho, I'm gonna dive into this because it's so relatable, and I'm gonna talk my shit. Like I'm gonna really get on this because I'm gonna dive so much deeper into. If you've been following me along, I've been making a few posts in regards to what we're seeing the greatest wealth transfer to be on the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical aspect. And there's still things I'm unlearning and relearning again. Let's give honor to Source, to the Creator, the Most High, the ancestors known and unknown for making all this possible. Again, from the emails that I did show you earlier, I am open for booking when it comes to public speaking. So there's things I'm getting in order. So if you can contact me there, we can arrange certain things and so forth. And let's get this ball rolling because this is very important for a lot of what's transpiring and unfolding right now. If I'm gonna say this name correctly, Andreas Wagner, 6-minute read or whatever. But baby boomers and millenniums, how trauma is informing the generational conflict. I love this picture and all like that, like because it says a lot. Now I'm not gonna read through everything. I'm just gonna scan over some stuff and then bring my experience. And again, you don't have to take on nothing. It's just to make you think, give you more insight on what's unfolding, what's happening, and so forth. And then, again, it would make so much more sense. Like once we realize what we're dealing with here, when I talked about how the baby boomers economic system and everything around that is what we're like almost leaving behind, the old world narrative and so forth. So let me dive right into this. Let's see here. So y'all hear me talk about how the baby boomer between 1946 and 1964. And these are the words of whomever the writer is. Let me see. Is observed the generational conflict. Again, millenniums are from 1981 to 1996. Now again, 1964 to 1981, I believe it's the Gen X. But still, that is still a part of the baby boomers' kids, and then we will be like the grandkids, I believe, of the baby boomers. Depending on the age of your fathers and mothers, because some of y'all have fathers and mothers. Like for instance, depending on like the demographics, I've noticed like, you know, some people have younger mothers and younger fathers, and that you will see a lot in the trenches and stuff. Not to say this doesn't happen everywhere demographically, but I've noticed a lot of people. Even it shocked me how some people I know, like my partner's mother and father, was like, they're in their 60s, so they would be a part of like the actual baby boomers, and I believe so, yeah. And then my mom was like only early 50s, mid 50s, yeah. My dad, so it's like, whoa, it's still a difference. So that being said, let's get into this. I guess so I can use my marker. Let's see here. Now, in recent years, one could observe something that was often labeled a generational conflict, thereby people from the millennium generation born between 1981 and 1996 directed a lot of anger, hate, and frustration at the baby boomers. I wonder why. Baby boomers are blamed, amongst other things, for stripping the younger generation of their economic opportunities, being greedy, and having no empathy towards the issue of social justice. Now, he references a book. Now, y'all open to do that, but again, when it said like that right there in itself, I can relate to that presently when I say I've spoken on how a lot of elders have they have a way of gatekeeping resources. When it says opportunities and then being greedy, having no empathy towards issues of social justice. It's not just social justice. You're talking about communication. You're talking about empathy even just towards who we are almost. Because of their upbringing and their hard-working mentality, they feel we have to do these things in order to obtain said success in this economy. And it's realistic for some who have, let's say, financial wealth or financial riches in their generation. And it's also realistic for people who are aware that there is a climate where certain people of a certain race or nationality of certain lighter shades do progress in an economic system where you're talking about economic racism or systemic racism, or just the structure around self-hatred in itself. For a man such as myself, it seems like he has to make more effort towards or almost dim his light just to be seen, just to be heard, or just to be acknowledged. And when it says being greedy, I've also dealt with the fact of dealing with people on both sides of this, both sides of dealing with people of lighter and darker shade who are not generous at all. And due to their self-righteous or selfish ways, I'm recognizing now that even through the economic, through what has happened, a lot of them are suffering right from the very hands of being so selfish, and even the system that they have put in place. And for them, it's so much more, as it'll dive into highlighting about the material aspect, how that's their focus mostly is the material rather than the internal aspect, which it highlights for millenniums, like the well-being that I've spoken about on previous videos. So he goes into how him being a millennium, a baby boomer's parent, being a millennium with baby boomer parents, do not aim to make judgment whether all the criticism towards baby boomers is justified. However, I think that many of these issues that young people deal with are very, very real, and they very much are. At the same time, I believe that the way the conflict, and I'm reading from this article, has played out over recent years were not very goal-oriented. In fact, I think that baby boomers understand too little about the millennium reality and vice versa. Now, I'm not going to play this video, but that's why I feel like, again, where I've talked about the miscommunications because of the traumas dealt with, a lot of it present, if in America or throughout other countries who have dealt with warfare, not just physical but spiritual warfare, the internal generational warfare that's passed on through generations. And so the miscommunication there is because a lot of them have dealt with things where they had to cover up, disguise, or even hide behind their emotions or whatever they feel, and cover it up with materialism, and they're going to speak more about that. Please keep in mind that what follows is a generalization of border trends. Individual experiences with generations are vastly different and dependent on the various factors: social, class, race, and gender. That is important. Because a lot of these things you see, you're not going to see a lot of darker people. I'm not going to play this video, but the first one was many parents of the baby boomers had to deal with traumatic events such as the Depression, as I've said before, the Depression, or the Great Depression they call it, or World War II. And that's the thing I've been noticing. I've been seeing a lot of, as I spoke before, I met another person that was in the service or the army and so forth yesterday, and there's a lot of these veterans or a lot of these people are on the street dealing with a lot of substance abuse. A lot of substance abuse, a lot of internal traumas that they never faced. And as it says here, there was a general desire to live a normal life that was focused on family and material well-being. So I've noticed that even when people that were so focused on after the wars, after coming out of said things, they never dealt with that post-traumatic post-traumatic stress disorder. They never dealt with the traumas around what they what they seen and what they experienced. Nightmares of not being able to rest correctly. And so I was expressing to someone, I said, I forgot what video I came across when the sister was expressing how once we realize like how divinely orchestrated this is, where we're watching an old world crumble right before us. What the baby boomers or generations before us built structurally, it has its purpose. It's very valuable in the sense of how it highlights what is invaluable for us internally, and then what was valuable for that generation. So what the misconception or misunderstanding, or people like to say, miscommunication is internally and externally, is that some of those generations of elders don't realize like that our reality, the reality of dealing with these present day traumas or present day traumatic experience from our childhood to now that they refuse to face, are something that is very highlighted now. Because it's not to say they didn't want to prioritize their well-being. It didn't. They didn't. That's the reality. They never did. So now that we're in this vulnerable state, there is no healthy dialogue. There is no healthy communication. They avoid it at all costs because they've avoided it for most of their lives. Their focus has been more geared towards trying to keep a family structure without the internal structure, focusing on their well-being and highlighting their emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being as well. So I was expressing to someone, I said, the beauty of what's really happening on a grander scale, especially with our women, is that energetically speaking and on the collective level, those who are aware of what's happening with the shift collectively, their bodies cannot withhold, just like a lot of elders, their bodies, and then their kids, their women, their body cannot. They're exhausted beyond measure, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and so forth, and it shows up in their physical presence. They're exhausted, and when I see a lot of elders, how they're barely, a lot of them can barely walk. A lot of them can, when you actually look at a lot of those homes, what they call it, like the homes where a lot of those people are, they don't tell you that a lot of them have dealt with a lot of those wars, or people have dealt with a lot of, not to mention the enforcing of medication that just numbs them and never makes, really get to the core of what's really going on with them. So a lot of those homes, what do they call it, nursing homes and, elder homes or whatever, that's a part of their structure. That's something they had to build. Even the school system, we're not talking about women or men who were in tune, who had a focus on the well-being of all involved, who focused on the individuality of the children, who highlighted their emotional state, their mental state, their spiritual, their imagination, and so forth. All of that was being stripped from them. So when you look at the things economically speaking, the culture around, what has been displayed, the politics, everything around the sense of valuing the individual and highlighting the beauty of who they are, that doesn't reflect y'all economic systems as elders. That's why a lot of them, there is no empathy. And it literally, what they've created is how exactly what they've created is how they actually do, like, the energy they put into it it's almost like, well, it is how they go out. So the homes that they built and all these structures, as much as we want that was the comfortability for them. So when they do have these homes and all these other things and so forth, these things are literally created for the comfortability of them. That's what we have to realize as millennium and the generation after us, that they built a world around their comfortability. They built a world around them feeling safe, even safe in their dysfunctionality. They built a world around conforming to what was even unhealthy for them. Are y'all hearing me? They literally created a world around stripping themselves of what? The powers that ain't it used to be. They literally created a world around stripping these very people of their essence, of their childhood experiences. When you look up the traumas around these people, their priority is not even having fun or creating healthy dialogues or relationships, partnerships, businesships, and so forth. That's where the greed comes in. That's where the self-righteous comes in. That's where the gatekeeping comes in. Because the well-being for you highlights the well-being for everyone. Okay, so it also goes into, if you can pause and read this, talks about how the first of many, okay, I read that part. Second, there was a demographic explosion due to the high number of people starting families. This led to strong feelings of social, cultural, and political attention by large numbers of baby boomers. Third, there was a period of unprecedented, if I read that right, precedented, whatever, prosperity and economic growth. And let me tell y'all something. I'm not ashamed of when I read, because let me tell you something. I have become a very better avid reader because, bro, I did not have no one on me reading when I was young. When I say those generations from baby boomers, and then what they say the Gen X generation that's in between the baby boomers and us, it's like the forgotten generation. So I know I speak to them. When I say the forgotten, it's almost like I see my mom, because my mom and dad is around that generation, or people that I know that are around that 40-ish, 50-ish, in between. And it's like they're on the tail end of the baby boomers, but it also shows how the baby boomers were so focused on the well-being, like just trying to be so focused on the well-being of, the family and the material well-being, that they forgot about their kids, bruh. They forgot it, and it's different perspectives. It's in different demographics. It looks completely different. The energy looks, the circumstances look completely different, but the energy is the same, y'all. And what do I mean by that? I mean the distorted mother, the distorted father aspect, meaning that the representation of people, whether socially, culturally, or politically, they still hold the energy of what? Whether stagnation or willing to evolve. So we are the evolution. And that's what happens. And so with that, again, let me go into, it talks about the different classes and stuff. Economic opportunities emerge. The number of products and money flowing through the system played in the general feelings of limitless opportunities. So, and I've noticed here, there is no pictures of people that are darker. That's something, again, that I like to pay attention to details. Because when you look at the Depression and the Great War, I always tell people to highlight as if y'all are not realizing how certain people of certain nationalities, whether lighter shades and so forth, migrated here, and who they connected with. This black and white shit I stay away from, because there are people from different shades that have always connected, whether through the fact of whether it was a horror story or a love story. And we can, that's a whole nother topic to where you're talking about, just the energy around how people came into it. It's like you tell one side when I look at this, but you don't tell the other side of how even some of these generations came into what you call generational wealth. Okay, so now look, I'm right here at the bottom. Now let's look at the mental health. Although many parents of the baby boomers generation experienced traumatic events, a general awareness around mental health issue was lacking. That is so fucking important, because we're forgetting the fact that we're acting like our parents and grandparents, like they did not, depending on the demographics, some of them were so consumed by religious beliefs, some of them were so consumed by their own internal warfare, their own mental disorders or whatever, and we're acting like we have people that prioritize their well-being. I've said this many times, and I'm going to stick to it because it still highlights it to this day. There's a disconnect, and then we're forced to try. Then it's forced upon us to try to relate to people who don't want to relate to the reality that you're not safe. You're not healthy for yourself or us. And that's where a lot of grace comes in, but at the same time, that's where a lot of no contact comes in. Okay, so proceed with reading. This leads to mental behavior or intellectual disabilities being undiagnosed and untreated. Now, Lord knows, how much of that really is untreated when they're talking about undiagnosed. And I don't always feel like you got to be diagnosed with something, because I'm talking about the highlighting the fact of mental behavior and intellectual disabilities. It should say emotional, which I guess is assuming that when it says behavioral. But I emphasize on this more. I cannot stress this enough. Not to say you don't stress, but highlight this enough around the awareness of, we're talking about people who have, there's an instability mentally, unstable behavior patterns, instability within, intellectually. From my experience, I've had people in my family, amazing people. Now, their love outshines their ability, to go to school a little longer. Let's just say that. Their love, my grandmother and other people I know, the way they know still how to structure things, even when they didn't really have a lot of support. When you're talking about economically speaking, and then around this time, from the baby boomers until my present day, around the 1980s and mid 80s and late 80s, we cannot exclude the fact of, you're talking about coming through wars and mental things, and also through the fact of dealing with the crack epidemic, and people of darker shades in certain demographics, not all but most, have dealt with limited resources. So that right there can put more stress and put more stress and also anxiety on a person, because a lot of their grandparents and a lot of their great grandparents were a part of wars that they didn't even want to be a part of. So and the spiritual war at that. So with that, it says, furthermore, there are a stigma concerning mental health treatment, and seeking out help was somewhat seen as a personal failure. Oh my God, can I highlight that? This is a fucking big thing. This is a big thing right now. I can just highlight it that way. Okay, I'm not doing all that. Anywho, furthermore, there was a stigma concerning mental health treatment, and seeking out help was somewhat seen as a personal failure. Oh my gosh. I know I've said this in another video, but listen, being the first generation, almost like going to therapy now, finding a safe place to talk to people, or the therapist and so forth, is very huge, because for me, as just a darker man trying to speak about what has happened, what is happening, and how it was very big to me because I was telling the therapist how I don't even know any man that I know personally that would sit down and talk about the shit that he's went through. And it's big for me because I don't think we realize how much of a distraction the world is, even our relationships. Do y'all realize like how much of a distraction the world has been? What we've allowed. How we want to chase the bag, chase dreams, chase goals. And all this shit is really a big distraction from ourselves. From ourselves. Getting to know ourselves. What we really want to find our purpose is. Other than someone else's belief system. I was caught up in it. The crossfire, as I call it. I said the gunfire, but I mean spiritual. Like crossfire. Of a generation of elders. And then the ones that came before me and the ones that come after me. It's like a crossfire. It's like the conflict. Being the first to be able to go through a situation where, and what's so amazing about it is like I was going through the shelter experience, like living in the shelter and then being able to, you know, get therapy. And it's amazing because it was tough because a lot of us don't have that safe place or people because we're so codependent on the very people. And that's another thing I'm going to get into. How could I do this? It's almost like this connects to what I'm talking about. But being a first generation, like that's huge for me. I told the therapist, I said, that's huge because I'm called to do this. There's no other men that I know personally that in my lineage that has went and gotten therapy or choose to even find, you know, a safe place to even get out his emotions and, you know, without there being judgment. And that's the biggest thing with our relationships, depending on our demographics, depending on our experiences. We're coming from generations, whether you want to, just because mom and dad may have had a lot of money or just because they gave you everything materialistically. They could have been the most perfect parent on the surface. But y'all not realizing that they still hold intergenerationally, you know, a dialogue of unresolved things, unresolved memories and emotions. Because a lot, let's say, just because I didn't grow up in a demographic where my mom could have given all these things materialistically, doesn't mean I wasn't grateful. But I recognize the thing around the fact that it's when it says here that there was a stigma concerning mental health treatment and seeking out help for somewhat seen as a personal failure. I know a lot of people who parents or great grandparents, they will work themselves to the bone before they actually seek out help, before they ask help for someone, which that was something very deep within my even demographics, or even they will seek out more help for people. And that's why I'm gonna get into this Stockholm syndrome thing. They will seek out more help from the very things that abuse them. The systems, and have this distorted way of being before they actually look to self and then created healthy connections with people. So what am I saying? It's like, yes, I've been around people where, you know, you're young and we don't, like, I'm cracking codes. I was sitting here like, bro, the belief system around even things culturally, where we're taught to chase and get all this material shit, and we don't even realize that comes from the baby boomers' belief system. So what we see characteristics of baby boomers in a sense of invulnerability compared with a focus on materialism. Additionally, there was a lack of mental health treatment, although traumatic experience was prevalent in many families. Therefore, I believe the trauma is playing a significant role, which leads to a small detour at this point. But anywho, that in itself, there has been, I know so many people can relate. When you look at, like, when I look at the, and this is just giving y'all something to make you think, when I look at the representation of an America in the last few hundred years, there isn't anything that, again, I've said, upholds the image of a darker man or darker woman that reflects the greatness, grandness of who they are, not only internally, what they built structurally, you know, who they are powerfully, like, you know, spiritually, mentally, and so forth. Not to mention, the opposite of that has been a focus on materialism from men who don't look like lighter shade people. I mean, who don't, there being a focus on men who behind the scenes or in these certain structures, when you see a certain post, YouTube, social, there's always an emphasis of, I'm giving this image of a man or a woman of a lighter shade who is so successful economically, who has this advantage, who has this schooling, who has this education. Y'all don't realize all of this system was created by people for even people to progress. And the code that I crack, I realize it's like, yo, you try to get me to believe that I should focus more on material shit. This is why you have even the idea, the narrative pushed by rappers, certain people who accumulate this idea of materialism, material wealth. The focus is to get the children to focus more on the material rather than the internal aspect of who they really are, the limitlessness of who they are, their spiritual currency, their imagination. And it's so funny because if it's telling you that, I've said this before, the highest suicidal rate is amongst men, but not just any man, a man that doesn't look like me. And I ask myself, why is that? Okay, so it starts to make sense now, because these are even men who have went to wars, who have created things in this violent warlike behavior with whatever internalized or whatever is going on within them. And then they take their women right along with them who don't want to be with them, who know that they have hidden tendencies or have this anger, have this rage, or have this disgust towards not only themselves, but also their own women and children and so forth, and then carry this narrative as if they're so great and mighty by destroying everything that comes along with them, because a man can destroy his empire by his actions and his impulses. So when we're looking at a man or whomever the man is, whether demographically speaking, whether politically, socially, on any level, how is he a representation of what is building and what has built his empire? So what you see right now, current day, that's crumbling, is the same energy that the men, your forefathers, have created through their violence, through their manipulation, through whatever it has been. Because whatever that, if it wasn't built upon things that were more focused on things that are focused on more materialism, gaining, being greedy, getting all they can and withholding it from other people, how can y'all say that that's not going to be the very thing that's destroying them? And then those who came along with it, who supported it, who were taught to be passive aggressive because they feared for their life and their kids. So yes, I'm going to hold you accountable as women, whether you are of a nationality, and we can use the term Caucasian, or of a lighter shade, or whomever. Even women behind the scenes who are still supporting these men. Your judgment is just as great as his. I mean, you don't escape it. So through that, when it states how even the lack or the awareness of the material, the mental health, or trying to get some type of treatment, or trying to find the balance, the very thing that, again, as I'm going to proceed when it talks about this, it tells you here, like, even what trauma is in response of that. People who have dealt with extreme events like acts of violence. Now, what is this? One thing I realize, I always tell you this. The first thing it says, trauma is a response to extreme events like acts of violence. Now, if we're coming from generations, no matter what your nationality is, people who have dealt with this, and then we're talking about leading up to 2-3 generations before who have dealt with this. As people are unable to correctly process and associate the emotion, shock, and deny are typically reactions to trauma beyond the beyond the initial reaction. Long-term emotional responses include fear, anger, sadness, and shame. Okay, this is so obvious of the climate of what has happened in America and other countries. This is why you have so many people instilled with fear, anger, sadness, and shame. For instance, when you're talking about demographically growing up in environments where there were violent behavior, okay, being exposed to that has a lot to do with what I'm going to get into right here. Now, when I look at Stockholm Syndrome, and I'm just breaking this down from my perspective, it says it's a psychological response where hostages or abuse victims develop positive feelings and identify with the captors or abusers. Now, from experience, I can honestly say, which having no shame and guilt around this, I experienced this. I unconsciously, till I became more deeply aware that I could have developed this syndrome. Then I go on a deeper level reading. Victims develop a strong emotional connection with the captors or abusers, often feeling sympathy, compassion, and even love. What kind of fucked up shit is that? So when I look at, from what I experienced growing up, from a mother or people, and I'm asking myself, is this teaching me how to develop passive aggressiveness? Is this teaching me that even what people, not all, but people in other countries who I was expressing to someone, that we so overlook the fact of other countries of darker shade putting their own people in captivity? Leaders and so forth that came along doing this, withholding resources, putting their own people in captivity, and these things have happened throughout time. We were just given a narrative to keep these cycles going until now. The cycle has been broken till people come to the awareness, like, y'all realize, like, scientifically the origins of everything is of a darker shade. So when you're talking about the captivity beginning with people of darker shade, then you will understand and overstand the bigger picture of how all this has transpired from generations and so forth. So when you're talking about developing an unhealthy emotional bond with the victims, developing an emotional connection to the abuser. Now, when I look at what I've been through and how I was taught to even be passive aggressive when, let's say, a grandmother or somebody was like, don't you talk back. That's a form of me developing when I had rage or emotions towards people who physically abused me, verbally, emotionally. And then here we are generationally, from generations before, who, even though you didn't deal with physical abuse, you dealt with emotional abandonment or a parent that was emotionally unavailable, which is a form of emotional abuse or neglect, however you want to perceive it. So then you carry that into your relationships, your settings, your school settings, your careers, and so forth. And you're taught to be passively aggressive, developing survival strategies or survival mentality, how to survive a world, how to survive a relationships. Because we're not coming from a system where it teaches us how to develop healthy connections or healthy partnerships. A lot of us don't even know what the fuck that looks like. I myself are just now knowing what that looks like at 35. I don't have no shame and guilt, but it's real. It's real. Because I consistently seen inconsistent, unhealthy relationships for so long. Not only with my parental people or people that was in my life, but a system where I can connect and say Stockholm Syndrome psychologically responds with a hostage. I feel like when you use fear tactics, when you see people who have dealt with domestic violence on social media, how the media portrays it, when you see people psychologically go through the fact of what has been pushed to them to be something they should love, something they should, you're teaching them something they should love rather than hate. When you're giving kids violent video games or giving kids violent certain things or feeding them things rather than feeding them love or giving them certain things where they should have empathy towards themselves or compassion towards themselves, love towards themselves. But the opposite of that is you're teaching them this. They grow up with let me read more of how you're almost keeping people captive to themselves or even hostage to a system who purposely have taught us, not only instilled in us to hate the parts of ourselves, but teaches our mothers and fathers who never learned to love themselves, so they never had empathy for us. So they brought kids into this world through traumatic experiences, so they never had empathy. And that's what you're seeing the generation of now. The greed, the selfishness, the lack of empathy from generations, from baby booms and so forth, is because why are we surprised that they don't have empathy? They don't want to have anything to do with us unless it involves anything around their belief systems. So when I look at Stockholm Syndrome, it says this phenomenon is characterized by development of emotional bonds and even affection towards a person causing them harm. It is not recognized mental disorder, but rather a survival mechanism. Shit, it's still a mental disorder. Because you develop something. When you say psychological response, that is mental. Psychologically. Come on now. But rather than either way, a survival mechanism is an extreme situation like captivity or domestic violence. Most of the people here don't even realize that when we're talking about Rest in Power Bob Marley, when he said free yourself from mental slavery, because it's in the mind. It has always been in the mind first, in the heart, in the body. It has always been within first. Freeing yourself from mental. Listen, I call upon my ancestors. We, of the highest good of all. Divine Mother, Father, all the higher ups, this is it. The spell, the illusion has been broken. It's binding. What's the term they say? We rebuke it. We banish it. That spell of these illusions that have kept people in this captivity. You don't know. That's what this is about. When people don't even realize, a part of being a part of certain systems is you being captive to that system. You being held hostage. A lot of y'all don't realize you've been held hostage. It's almost like keeping yourself hostage to your own fears or the illusions or belief systems of someone else. When someone comes along and project their shit onto me, you're asking me to become hostage to your fears. of what you feel a man should be. I should remain hostage. Certain relationships are like, honestly, I can say that from the fact that when you're dealing with domestic violence, or when you're dealing with violence, when you have dealt with certain things, guess what? You have dealt with a hostage situation. If you don't know how to get out of it, if you don't know how to heal, if you don't know how to acknowledge something, can you honestly say like, oh my gosh, I've been a part of something where I've held myself hostage, or even developed some type of strong connection to something very unhealthy. And it's not even your fault. It's because your grandmother and great grandmother, a lot of them, they were held hostage to a system. They were captive in a system that did not want them to evolve past to know that they can be independent thinkers, entrepreneurs, learn things, see the beauty of who they are. So all they knew was survival mechanisms. All they knew was to survive a system that now is crumbling. So guess what? That challenges us now to thrive. And when we say we're thriving by resting and recovering, by looking at things that we have to heal from, guess what? They're going to attack that. That's where the conflict comes in. You don't believe in what you did and what you went through, mom, grandmas, that's not my belief system. That's not that doesn't serve me. It served its purpose, but that doesn't serve me. You mad at that? So what? Respectfully, things have changed, and they're still going to change. Even when the generation of kids that come after us, are we going to teach them to survive our world, or are we going to teach them to thrive in their own world now, where we all have to live amongst each other? Harmony, peace, because everyone's world is different. My perspective from a darker man is not the same as another man that is darker, who come from another country, or who lives here, or lives somewhere in a certain state or whatever. It's not the same. His perspective is different. The energy might look the same, but his experience is not. So listen to this. Also, Stockholm Syndrome, distrust of authority. Victims may distrust law enforcement or other external authorities, potentially hindering their abilities to seek help. Bro, that shit right there, it's like, when you see how a lot of us has been tricked to believe, like, because that's deep, because you want to trust the authorities or higher ups, but at the same time, it's just like, when you see the atmosphere of what policing has represented, when you seeing the distrust, so that's really tough to accept, especially that, because when you have seen a system that has held certain people captive only to keep them in a place of a loop of the court system, the judicial system, things that were literally only to serve certain people, to get them off and so forth, and now it's crumbling. And so with that, it's like, even when you want to seek some type of help, no one wants to see people, truthfully, like, who have not got a fair sentence, or whatever you want to call it, like fair treatment in that system. That's a tough one there. That's a tough one, because it was allegedly, you can look this up, research it. It talks about how let's just say in this climate, it was speaking about, you can research this, facts check about who commits crime the most. And I've always believed that people that did not look like me committed crime the most, but the world was trying to convince me that people that look like me did. But then the guy expressed how people that are darker are convicted the most, whether falsely and so forth. They're convicted the most. That doesn't mean they commit crime the most. So, just let you know there. Let's see. Stockholm Syndrome is frequently seen as a case of domestic violence and child abuse, where victims become attached to their abusers. Now, the importance of this is like, when I looked at this, I was sitting here like, whoa. Now, when you talk about abuse, we we think of child abuse first as like someone, a child being, beat on or whatever. But we don't go to the root of a system that was created from intergenerational or generational traumas that have been passed on through these very people in certain positions who carry the rage, who built their structure upon rage and violence, division, so many other things that can go on and on. And so how do we ignore the fact of it doesn't teach people to find solutions? It isn't teaching people to come together. You're talking about a system created purposely for division, divide people amongst themselves, keep them from finding solutions, keep them from communicating, keep them from facing themselves. So why are we surprised what we're seeing present day? Why? So when I'm looking at what this represents as what Stockholm syndrome, just it ain't even just the domestic violence part. It's more so like, yeah, it is, because I've had stories of my mom, in a fearful state and so forth. When I even look at, like, I don't give a fuck. It is what it is. When I look at even the fact of the United States being the most, at the present day, like, housing, or you can even say people will get pissed at it. I don't give a fuck. It's like when you look at hostage or an abusive system, whether some people feel like, oh God, well, how do we put away people that have done this and did this and did this? Listen, karma don't miss nobody. I cannot say like, oh my gosh, this person did this and they don't deserve this. I'm not a part of certain things when it comes to whatever it is, dealing with those prison or jailing system or whatever it is. I do recognize a lot of the convictions and how things were purposely created to even, again, it's almost like people are in a hostage position. Even how people are treated, even the systems in place. How are you not holding someone hostage if this person over here can commit something, a crime or whatever, and this person comes along and does the same, and then they're automatically thrown and their life is thrown away, and they're and then it's man, it's just, for a country to be having the most incarcerated people in the world says a lot about who they are and what they represent. And so it's like when I look at the representation of everything, a lot of it's, again, once people start to come to the realization, like the climate of this country and what it represents, like I will always encourage people, like it's better elsewhere. I didn't say there wasn't things happening in other places. It's more so like I've always been speaking about how there's a great deal of karma coming to this country because of what's been hidden, because what's been intentionally enforced only for it to backfire. So, man, let me see. In order to regain emotional control, people usually develop coping mechanisms. And this is people who dealt with, when you're talking about trauma, how we deal with trauma as human beings. One of the most common substance abuse, such as alcoholism, drug use, or smoking. Furthermore, bro, and I've seen this, a lot of my elders, a lot of them, I never wanted to even get into alcohol like that. But how are we ignoring that? When you look at the stuff, how are we ignoring that? There's so many liquor stores in certain demographics. How are we ignoring that? the wineries, like some stuff that's almost, it's like not almost, it's created intentionally for people to like. When y'all look at the baby boomer generation, they are some drunks. They are some functional drunks. People acting like, you know how people try to say they change their life, and I'd be like, yeah, I get it, but stop acting like just because y'all built these churches or built certain things and did this and did that y'all wasn't going home smoking y'all weed, doing whatever it is. Y'all just try to hide it. So come on, man. Like, you know how you have some elders like swear they was changed and try to make it seem like we should get our life on track, when the whole time we don't even know who the fuck you are outside of your whatever career, whatever it is. And a lot of it, like the reality that I've noticed is like a lot of them are they're heavy drinkers. A lot of those people that come from those wars, I noticed a lot of them was very disconnected. They would drink a lot, end up with cirrhosis of the liver. Then the medication didn't help them. Do a lot of smoking and drink. Like, it would be a lot. They would. You talking about crack epidemic, the Gen X generation. We're really ignoring the fact of like there was no mental health awareness. It was more material than anything to cover up what they felt. It even says it right there. Hold on. Furthermore, researchers that found that there's a link between materialism and post-traumatic stress. And it's like they're trying to convince us to buy all this shit, get all this, and do all that. And it's almost like we don't even realize we're left with their shit. All this material stuff. I go on Facebook Market and I go on this and this and this. These folks don't collect all this shit. And I'm telling you, it's so funny because I want y'all to realize this shit is funny, but listen, these folks it's houses right now. When I start looking at houses, these are people who are 60, 70, 80, whatever. And due to, when you saying go in no contact, these are people that are being left alone to literally be unalive in their home. Like, people don't even want to deal with them. It's that rough. Like, I know a lot of y'all can relate. Folks don't even be wanting the house no more. Folks don't even want to deal with them. Then you got them, some of these elders so caught up and so in their belief system, so rooted in their inability to relate or inability to connect emotionally. They don't want to deal with nobody else but Jesus or whomever else or whatever else they got going on, their materials or whatever that comforts them. And they don't even realize how unconscious they push them, due to the inability to learn about themselves. They push everybody away, and this is happening with a lot of them. I see it present day. I remember one time I know someone personally, an elder. Like, I went to wear one thing that they've had in their home for so long. You'll notice how they hoard. This is where you see a lot of mental disorder. They hoard a lot of stuff. I know a lot of y'all know that. They hoard so many clothes, stuff that they had for 20, 30 years. Their cars. They hoard a lot of stuff. They brag so much about their military, their serving and so forth, as if all of those people that return are not dealing with some post-traumatic stress or, dealing with some type of internal dialogue that they have never faced or made peace with. But they've covered it up. They masked it. These are a lot of your veterans. These are a lot of people who serve. And then you see some of these generations on the tail end, the Gen X, with they feel that they should do that. This is where identity crisis come in. They feel they should do that. And they starting to realize, like, you're only doing what someone else has instilled in you. You don't even know yourself. You don't even have a belief system outside of what your mom and dad has told you. Then you get this reality check to realize, like, oh shit, what have I been doing? Why have I been doing it? Do I love what I do? And if you do, to each their own. But here, when it says researchers have found that there's a link between materialism and post-traumatic stress, I'm saying like, bro, I was going through the fact of like I had to gain all this and this and this, and unrealistically, that's not even realistic for me. This is why you see so much of women, their belief systems, and then even the ones who didn't even have a father, trying to tell men that they should have all these things, which is coming from a belief system of baby boomers, of people who you're trying to live comfortably in a world that they created and not even your own. So you're thinking gaining all this material shit is going to bring you fulfillment. Let me say that again. Let me connect it. Even if you did have a father that gave you everything, even if you was a military baby that traveled and so forth and so forth. Okay, what belief system do you have outside of what your father has given you? He was so strict. He was so aggressive. He was passively aggressive. I know a lot of women and people who have dealt with fathers that were in that structure and so forth. Yeah, he could have been organized, he was structured, but at the same time, they didn't prioritize well-being. I went through things where people don't even realize, like, bro, I almost signed up for what they call it, the National Guard. That shit was blocked purposefully. A lot of shit was divinely guided. I was divinely guided to hear. Because why do I need to put my energy towards something to gain and to try to build a successful life? Because it was more geared towards finding successful, being successful materialistically rather than what is internal success. What about my well-being? That's what success is for me. So to me, less is more. Less is more in the sense of like, I don't have to obtain all these things to feel a sense of being seen. Y'all grew up in a world where the belief system of our elders have taught y'all to believe the more you have, the more valuable you are. And that's the opposite of what it really means. That's their world. And that's why a lot of them are suffering at the hands of that. They have created a facade. And then you see a lot of people, you look at rappers, you look at artists, they're a part of that too. They're on the tail end of that too, culturally. Some of them, they do rap about, okay, what ancestors had, because they knew the importance of resources when it came to land and all this other stuff. Certain things that value, that left generations with things that they could value and pass on to the other generation. Things that are more, wisdom, spiritual, wisdom. Things that are valuable that no one can take from you. Character development, integrity, and so forth. No, I'm not going to sit here and act like these generations, these elders, it's not a hate thing, but they hate us. Not all of them. There's hatred. There's internal rage because a lot of them will come to the realization they lived a life that they don't even feel they deserve. They don't even feel worthy. Outside of materialism, they don't even feel worthy of life. They don't even feel worthy of things that are really more internal, that have more internal substance. Such as a family dynamic. Not hiding who they are behind what they've obtained, but something that's internal, like emotional stability or having a healthy emotional connection with your kids. Building something healthy with your kids. That's longevity. This is why some of them are emotionally unavailable. It's not their fault. It's just what they came through. It's just what their belief system had them believing. I told y'all, this is why you see majority, when I see the unresolved things, I see why when certain fathers were removed, or I see why certain fathers were there, women only know money. And they only know that concept of money is because of what their fathers taught them. That's why they feel like they should go into careers and do certain things and work hard because my dad provided this for me and this is how my man should be because he has to be like my father because my father. And I get that because guess what? That's great. He gave you some type of structure. But did he give you internal structure? Did he remind you of your internal structure? Did your mother remind you of your internal structure? Because what was overlooked is the post-traumatic stress that your father never talked about. What was overlooked was the fact that he never truly Y'all never truly had a healthy emotional connection. So he only knew to show you money. So that's your only identity that you can connect with being a woman, with being a man. So systematically, that's what you've been given. So now you're suffering now you're suffering or going through things where you didn't realize until you got to this point where all this material shit don't mean nothing. So when you look at the fact of your sports, when you look at a lot of things that has been given to us and shown to us, how can y'all not see from generations before that how and when the NBAs, the sports, the Coliseum, all these things were built when? Okay, so then when you connect the generations and the people to that, it shows you how thing has changed, not evolved. It changed, because you can change clothes but not evolve inwardly. That means the I can't even get the word out. The structural racism around how certain athletes are still treated to this day. The energy around these structures. Matter of fact, let's do this. I don't even gotta look at boom. 1949. But why did it say June 46, New York? Okay. So this is funny. Now we go. Let's crack some codes here. The league later adopted the BBA history and considering the founding of June 1996 and its own. Okay. So either way, it was created in 1949. Okay. Either way. Now, bro, look at the images, bro. Look at the image and what was it created by, who was it created by, and then again, you cannot ignore the fact of there was things that changed. At a time, it just represented people that did not look like people of darker shade, and then I know a lot of these athletes still deal with it today. Y'all, come on now, they still deal with it today. Y'all acting like these people are still, some people even call it modern day captivity or slavery. They use the term, just to keep people, if it says it was created in 1946, now I want you to peep this out now. 1946, right? Hold on, no, it's right here. 1946, 1949 they adopted, right? What is this? That's how I see how shit like, bro. The baby boomer generation. Now I want y'all to look. Now, how can you ignore the fact of when you look at how things have changed? And I'm telling you, from when I watch certain things, I used to watch it for the fact of how people were gifted in said basketball. Then it started to change into which it says like evolve into again. You start seeing people with cars, money, how they dress, so forth. Because from my perspective, I feel who better to express that? Who better to express that? Who? That's what I'm saying. The flashiness, because that thing is a part of the fact of getting your attention, almost like feeding you this narrative. Who better to do that? So let's see again. I'm just connecting, so.
Right. So there. Okay, so.
Okay, so I don't know if y'all hear people in the background. That's why I'm just in this room. So there's someone next door.
So what I did was
okay, look. NFL 100. What year? What year was it created? 1920s. Okay. 1920s. So again, this is still significant. Before you talking about before the baby boomers. And again, look at the imagery. The reason I say this is so you realize what shit is founded upon. Look at the imagery.
I know. Especially my girls.
Look at the imagery, because again, there was emphasis on creating things around a certain nationality or colorism around certain things until it changed. Until that's when the greed and money start coming in. Because the reason why I tell y'all this is because a lot of shit y'all don't realize was a distraction from now you realizing. And that's why I even talked about videos where I was like, bro, they don't tell you the aftermath of a lot of those men who are in sports, their bodies and so forth. Emotional well-being is a priority in the NBA. Emotional well-being isn't a priority in the NFL. I would not be surprised eventually that I will have clients when it comes to that. Because even when I look at Stockholm Syndrome, like you're talking about the fact of how systematically, when you're talking about victims developing a strong emotional connections with the captors or abusers, often feeling sympathy and compassion, even love, the fact that we've grown to love or have, certain things like that on a society that has abused us as men that are darker. I know this is tough because we have got so we don't even realize generationally we have been a part of things that neglected us, as wanted us to neglect our well-being. And I know people they will be piss poor morally of the fact of, well, your ancestor, well, what about this? Well, how would you have gotten this? Listen, you're talking to someone who still can play basketball to this day and play it phenomenally, naturally gifted. It was just not my calling. To each their own how people came into their success. But this is where things come to a closing. The curtain is closing because there's a bigger picture when you see the representation of the Divine Mother, Divine Father, or the energies balancing out. When I look at the fact of how, a system that has been implemented to where it neglects athletes, it abuses them, it manipulates them. When I see how structurally it almost nitpicks and keeps our kids in the loop of believing a false narrative of this is how you could only be. If you in this is who you have to look to or look up to. If all this false idolization, if that's a word, or all this false empowerment around athletes or certain people, rather than it being around the generational the well-being of our kids, of them really, like I've talked in videos about this, about how, again, when you look at the materialism, the focus on materialism, you'll make more shoes, you'll make more stuff. All this stuff, again, is created from these generations to accumulate, to be greedy, to accumulate and support the capitalism aspect. Not humanitarianism, capitalism. So let's see here. Now studies suggest that prevalence of trauma is relatively common. In the U.S. sample of 2,953 adults, traumatic events were prevalent in 89.7. This is my thing. To even know of athletes who pretend not to see traumatic experiences on television of men that look like them. You cannot tell me psychologically that a system or them being part of a corporation or a business, that doesn't teach your ass to be passive aggressive. You're a coward. You're a coward. I'll tell you to your face, you're a coward. You're a coward. To not even acknowledge the fact, and this is why y'all judgment is here. You're cowards. You're nothing to be afraid of. You're nothing to look up to. Because ain't nobody got to look up to you. Only people who look up to you are kids. And that's why a lot of y'all this false idolization or this throne that you built, a lot of you are empty internally. Because you never care for the well-being of the generation that is coming. And they're going to figure you the fuck out. Like we already have. That's what it is. And that's why a lot of you are fading to the back. Because you had an opportunity, like I've told y'all before, a lot of y'all in certain positions had an opportunity to speak. But you were afraid of a system that had already abused you emotionally, mentally, in your industries or whatever it is, that have abused you. But due to your inability to gain a sense of awareness and gain a sense of self-security, to reconnect to your essence, because that's what it was brought around for you to see, no matter what type of system or whatever you were a part of. There's no difference in me speaking up and crumbling in an illusion and you speaking up. I don't care about your status. I don't care about who you are in the sense of what you represent in this world, but on a grander scale, in the spiritual realm, and there's something greater than this. We all know, those who are in tune and aware, you have no power. You're powerless. You're powerless, and it's going to show, and it's going to speed up even more rapidly that you are inauthentic, that you're not a man or woman of integrity, who don't have a sense of compassion and empathy for the generations after. Your shoes, your clothing, none of that shit means nothing at all, because the light is here. And the light also knows that it comes from the darkness. So there is no more manipulation. There is no more isms and schisms and spells and illusions that can be. No, the veil is already lifted. So I'm not going to teach our kids to focus on materialism. Focus on your spiritual currency. You are limitless. You are fearless beings. You are powerful. You are magnetic. And this is why certain people want to come and get said athletes or certain gifted kids who have an anointing on their life. You just couldn't get me. And a lot of you out there, a lot of you kids, or a lot of you who know you have an anointing, you are to walk upright in a righteous path. To know that you're supposed to walk, not you're supposed to be better. And you can be better, and you will be better, because you are valuable, you are loved, you are clear, your path is clear. You get to walk whatever path you choose. That's what makes you chosen. Ain't no athlete, ain't nobody out here as chosen as you are. Everyone is chosen. It's when you choose to be better. That's what makes you and anyone else valuable. I had to get that out. So again, it talks about how majority, if not 90%, of people that they did a study on have traumatic experiences. Because you're talking about a traumatic induced fucking... Your mothers have been through traumatic experiences. Your fathers and so forth. While trauma primarily affects individuals who directly experience traumatic events, research suggests that it affects and also extend to their children and grandchildren. It tells you right now, we are the result of that. Thereby, trauma has an intergenerational effect. Concluding from this part, I think that there are several important parts. First, we have to notice that people use coping mechanisms in order to deal with traumatic experiences. Second, the prevalence of trauma is widely spread throughout society. And third, trauma has not only an effect on the individuals who's experienced the event, but also on the following generations. So again, for y'all not to be able to speak up and talk about what's really going on, you're teaching our kids to be passive aggressive. So fuck you. And that's real. I don't care who you are, athlete, anyone else. You have a platform, you have something, you will be held accountable too. Well, you will fall by the wayside. That's why we already know there's a shift. A lot of us know there's a shift from inauthenticity to authenticity. You know who you are. I'm not going to call no names because you know who you are and you know who we are. Don't ever think that or assume that before some of you like are predestined. Some of you have no one can take your destiny from you. Let's no one can take what's written, what's already written. They can attempt to, they can cast illusions, no one can know. And I'm a prime example of that. I'm a prime example. And that's what's so grateful about this, to remind the generations after, no, they will be much more grander, much more aware. They would know exactly. They already figured out who. Because a lot of y'all, I don't care what your status is, you don't give a fuck. And you don't have to, that's cool. But I do. Because I love myself and I care for myself unapologetically. And I don't have to be befriend or be accepted or look for a world who generationally, when you focus on the materialism, you literally have a lot of athletes, you have a lot of celebrities, a lot of people are in place who are purposely there not to even bring awareness. They don't have to, but they collect karma along the way, and it will backfire on them. There's no difference in people in your community. It's just levels to it. It's similar energy, y'all, that's playing out. And a lot of them, no matter their status, whoever they are, this is as weeks being separated from the chaff. A lot of them are invaluable. They are valuable to the bigger picture, but they don't hold valuable. They don't hold value because a lot of them more focus on material rather than their internal world. The effects of the trauma on baby boomers. Where are above mentioned points? Spiritual passed down to their children with material. Look at it. Look at it. Somebody come look at it. I got a few more minutes. I got to head out. The effects of trauma on baby boomers. That's why a lot of, again, don't be y'all sitting here fool and wonder why. If you think that the people that, let's say, hold the financial wealth and material wealth, this is your code right here. Let me drop this to you. If you think that the people economically, when it comes to the crumbling, and this is why you're going to see a lot of celebrity things or people who represent the old world, which represents the baby boomers, or people who came into their said wealth or hold the bank, all that stuff monetarily. Why don't y'all think that they are a part of pushing a narrative of materialism? The effects of trauma on baby boomers. Why are the above mentioned points so important? I believe they suggest that trauma was in fact widespread throughout the baby boomer generation. Even though it was mostly their parents' generation, they experienced the traumatic events. That's just like saying, for instance, when you're talking about baby boomers or you're talking about people from other countries, whatever it is, their wealth and how much they want to influence the youth. That's the whole purpose of that. So that the youth don't know who they are, so the world won't change. But the time is up. It's a wrap. So with that, even though it was mostly their parents' generation that they experienced a traumatic events, it is likely that they are passed down to their children, with materialism being one of the main coping mechanisms. With this in mind, we take a closer look at millenniums. Contrary to the baby boomers generation, millennials show greater awareness and openness towards issues of mental health. Yes, we do. And then you can read this part. Anxiety, depression. On one hand, we were pitched a world full of opportunities for what they could achieve. On the other hand, they had to realize that it's much harder for them to be economically successful. Well, of course, when you have people, gatekeepers, whether spiritually, physically, and so forth, whether it's dealing with finances, whether you're talking about gatekeeping in the spiritual community, because I'm going to call it all out. Because before y'all, I keep telling y'all, before y'all see shit happen on a physical plane, it happens spiritually. So a lot of things spiritually, spiritual warfare, things that, on a grander scale, where there are people who have an anointing or a calling that are coming here on a mission and a purpose to elevate, to evolve, to return back to their essence, to align with that which is authentic. There's resistance that come with that. That's why you see people in the physical play out who have this. Your light can be intimidating. Your light, it brings up their jealousy and envy. And this is a lot of the unhealed and unresolved things within generations, amongst other spiritual warfare, amongst other, entity attachment, low vibration. Once you realize a lot of those baby boomers, a lot of those previous generations are operating low, then you'll realize why we go high. We operate high. We're talking about generations that were dealing with a lot of unresolved things sexually, mentally, emotionally, and so forth. So now that we are acknowledging and healing it, we create a different world. We travel. We go through experiences. That brings us more awareness in who we are. Then we realize like this shit economically was never for us per se. It's not to say that it doesn't, it's not a genuine support. Especially, as a darker man, it's not a genuine support. It's not something I'm like, oh my gosh, I can go crazy. This economic, this is, no, I have to recognize the fact that when I look at certain things, when I look at even who's represented by what and who's gatekeeping what, I don't care what type of status they in. That shit is to recognize it and to realize like now you have to also be aware and discerning and so forth. So now moving forward, that your path has always been divinely guided. You wasn't supposed to do certain things with this person or align or do simply because of what? A lot of y'all don't realize like a lot of your divine protection or even how you had to go through certain things is because that person, whether in that community setting, whether in that industry and so forth, we're not a part of that rejection was a part of, the bigger picture, the new world order of things. As the old world order leaves, the order of things, the disorder, now to reorder, to restore, to rebalance, to restructure. So outside of color don't make you kin and the colorism and the structures, economically you'll see that you right now are the powers that be. You right now presently hold a blueprint. That's what and then our kids, same thing with them. The importance of implementing the well-being. I see it. And it's beautiful. And so with that comes with resistance, where people know that you have a calling, and then people in the physical, they realize, oh my gosh, they keep you from trying to progress. That's why certain things you realize, certain blockages you got here, and all of a sudden, boom, people try to remove their hand and try to breadcrumb you, only for them to realize, like, nobody can play the Most High or Source. No one, you're sitting here thinking like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to get this and get this? And don't realize like the universe, whatever you want to call it, the divine sees all. There's nothing that goes unnoticed. Because even when they removed and did this, there still was an energy behind it. I start to sit back and laugh like, oh my God, I'm grateful. Because even with certain things, I counter it immediately. Like, oh, I'm glad this relationship, I'm glad that this and that. You just never know what was a setup. You just never know, and I had to remind myself, like, listen, a lot of these things are coming to a hedge because the beauty of it now, the bigger picture, it's about realizing like that they created a world that they're comfortable with, and they want us to conform and be comfortable with their world, whether it be the powers that ain't or used to be, whether it be nations, countries, and so forth. No, naturally we are the rebels. Naturally we are naturally when you realize, like, as you take back authority and call back your power and shit, you really run this shit. The fearlessness, I am fearless, I am untouchable, and that's simply because I choose to walk in the fact of divine protection, knowing that I have to just move the way I have to move. We all have to be aware, but also walk in that like confidence and authority, because no one can ever take that from you. Your spiritual currency. So you can look up this article and read more on it. again, it's the acceptance of where we are and where we're going. That's the most challenging part of it all. It's the acceptance and knowing that all of this was divinely orchestrated. All of this was divinely orchestrated. And where there is hate, there is admiration. Peace and blessings. Shalom.